I love saving money. And maybe it's because I grew up so poor that so many small things can make me feel rich. But I will challenge anyone to not feel rich when you have flown first class from one side of the world to the other for $120, right? I'm on this conference. My business is still ticking along. It's supporting my family. It's supporting my team. I'm here shopping, adding to the local economy. And, I'm not a billionaire, but having lived a life in borderline poverty when I was younger, I live a nice middle class life now. And I can safely say life is pretty good when you have money. You can support other people. You can give to charity. You can make the world a much nicer place. You get to choose what you do with that money. And the great news is you don't have to be a bitch in the process. Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. You know how there are always those conversations that for some reason, they just seem to stay with you. And years later, you can still recall exactly where you were, what the weather was like, even the sounds in the background, like the music that was playing on the radio. Somehow those situations just seem embedded in our psyche. Well, the other day, I was on a podcast and the host asked me at the end for a quick quote to finish up the episode. And I just said, the more money we make, the more people we serve. Well, of course, the episode did not end there because he then wanted to go deeper into the conversation. Like, why did I pick that? And can you tell me more about where that came from? The first thing that popped into my head was this time, I think it was maybe 2019, 2020. We all get confused with the whole COVID thing. The year before we got locked down in COVID, whenever that was, I was sitting in this train on the subway in New York, and I was on my way to the NRF show where I was going to interview Jane Liu from Showpo. And you can listen to that episode on the podcast if you want to go back and find it. And while I was there, I was sitting there, and there were these two girls kind of standing up, just sort of next to me, but kind of behind me. And they were talking about how money is evil. And it was probably a good 15 to 20 minutes that I was on that. I don't know. How far does the subway? It feels like it was a long way, but maybe I just had an all-stop train. But I'm going to say it was maybe 15 or 20 minutes because, in hindsight, you never quite remember the exact amount of time. But during this time, they pretty much just wrote off anybody who had money. I remember them talking about Kim Kardashian and how her life was so unattainable. This was pre the Kanye breakup, if I'm correct. I'm not really a Kim K fan. And then there was another celebrity that I'd never heard of. Clearly, I am not your pop culture person, but they had said that about her, and as I said, I don't remember her name, that she had forgotten where she came from. And the whole gist of this story was really that money is plain evil. Now, I didn't say anything, which you're probably shocked at, right? Because I'm the kind of person who does talk to people on trains. But I was so completely swept up in this conversation. And I remember I was holding my iPad, reading my book, in air quotes, and trying my best not to look straight at them, because you know how when you're listening, eavesdropping on a conversation, you actually want to look at the people and see what it is they're talking about. Well, I was trying to not do that. I was very conscious because, foreigner on a train, very conscious of not doing that. But I find it really hard the focus needs to be like where my eyeballs are. But anyway, so I was so interested in what they were saying, and I would not make a good spy because I was looking at them quite a lot, but they were so wrapped up in their conversation, they didn't even notice. So I'm listening to them. But at the same time, in my mind, I'm having an argument with them, only in my mind, about how great money is. Because here's the thing, on the way to that show, I had flown first class from Sydney to New York. So there is no way that anyone who has flown first class can ever say money is bad. Even better, I'd use my frequent flyer miles and it would only cost me $120. So that was fantastic. And once you've flown first class, you will never want to fly anything else ever again. I was staying in a beautiful apartment. Once again, I'm going to say Upper West Side, Upper East Side. I'm not quite sure. Beautiful apartment, marble, like a historic 1930s apartment, but beautiful marble bathrooms. And there was a doorman who got my Amazon parcels for me. And again, I paid for it with points. Hadn't cost me anything. So I was essentially on this kind of work holiday, and maybe I'd spent about $500 to get there. I had a press pass to go to the conference. So my outlay, I'm just like, okay, look, money's good, but it's even better when you can have all these things and you don't have to spend an awful lot of it. So I was going to the conference. I had these podcasts lined up and I was going to learn a whole bunch of stuff. You might think I'm a little bit fancy. I am not a little bit fancy. I know people seem to think that. Trust me. I walk around most of the day in my yoga gear, my gym gear. I'm the kind of person who would much rather go out for a really good gluten-free burger than a fancy 3-course dinner. I don't own a $2,000 handbag. I think I own 2 handbags, and the most expensive one of those was $200. And I basically use it as a laptop bag every now and then. And I love to DIY. I love saving money. And maybe it's because I grew up so poor that so many small things can make me feel rich. But I will challenge anyone to not feel rich when you have flown first class from one side of the world to the other for $120, right? Okay. Meanwhile, I'm on this conference. My business is still ticking along. It's supporting my family. It's supporting my team. I'm here shopping, adding to the local economy. And, I'm not a billionaire, but having lived a life in borderline poverty when I was younger, I live a nice middle-class life now. And I can safely say life is pretty good when you have money. You can support other people. You can give to charity. You can make the world a much nicer place. You get to choose what you do with that money. And the great news is you don't have to be a bitch in the process. And, so much of the media portrays people with money to be rich, just like these 2 girls on the train. So your business is there to make you money so that you can live the life that you want, whatever that looks like for you. So to make more money, you have to do 2 things. You have to increase your profit margin and you've got to increase your sales. Preferably, I'm hoping we can do both of those for you on this podcast. I'm going to cover maybe the profit part first, because I don't want you to end up growing broke. I have been there. I have done that. I've had to sell my house to get out of the crapper. You don't need to go there and make those mistakes, because you can learn from the mistakes that I have made. So when I opened my business, my first physical business, I did it because I couldn't buy the things that I wanted in Australia at the time. I had no retail experience. Well, I lie. I had a little bit of retail experience. I'll tell you about that in a second. I didn't even have sales experience. Like, looking back, I had no right to open a store, right? But the job that I was doing at the time, and in fact, the jobs I had done to get to this point were, I was an arborist, I was a horticulturist, and then I moved on to managing hundreds of guys. And before that, in terms of management, I wandered around people's backyards as a tree preservation officer for the local council. So I did have a little bit of retail experience. But that retail experience consisted of stocking shelves in the freezers of a supermarket, which was actually a really great job, because I would put my big, Eskimo suit on and I would walk into the freezers. I would have 4 of these trolleys that I needed to get emptied in 4 hours. I would have little bets with myself. And it was always a bit of a bet with the people who worked in the freezer. It's like, can you get 4 of these trolleys done in 4 hours? And you'd always leave a note for the next person. So, had a little game that you could play. You could listen to some music if you wanted to. You had to make sure that you kept your little beanie on. But my experience with retail was pretty much stacking shelves in a freezer, or sometimes stacking shelves out in the store. But here I am, passionate about making sure that you can sell more products to your customers and make more money in the process, and learn from my okay, I've been in this retail game for like nearly 2 decades now. So learn from my experience. And the reason I want to do that is because I truly believe that the more we sell, the more money we make, the more people we help. So when I first opened my store, I had no idea how to price my products. So I did what I know a lot of people do. I simply Googled the product. I saw how much other companies were selling it for, and bam, I had my pricing. So fast forward, I'm going to say a couple of months into business. And now, just as a backstory, I'm like really good at the backstories. And if you watch these videos, I kind of like move my head over to the sides. I'm like, just come over here with me right now. As a backstory, when I opened my retail business, we were in the start? I'm going to say the start of the GFC, like 2007. So GFC was kind of 2007, 8, and 9. And I can say now that that situation was very similar to what we're seeing economically right now. So housing market's still quite buoyant, but people definitely tightening their belts and discretionary spending was tightening. And that happened for a few years. But I was selling products that no one else could buy. So my sales were increasing, but I seemed to have less money in the bank account. And I remember thinking like, WTF is happening here? People are coming in, people are buying, I have no money. Now you probably were wondering where this is going, right? That I had no idea what it cost for me to operate my business. So I had no idea what margins I needed to be profitable. And if you listened last week, I told you about how I had a degree in business and I didn't understand this stuff. I don't remember anyone ever talking about markup and margins in my 4 years of doing that degree. And I know we talked about business and it wasn't necessarily retail, but I feel like that's an important thing no matter what you're selling. So if you've heard this story, just bear with me for a second. I remember a time when we used to sell these wet bags, and I'm looking around because 20 years later, I still have some of those wet bags. I still use them to this day. And whenever I say them, I always look around like, do I have one? Because quite often I'll stick my laptop in one, but I don't seem to have one with me right now. But we had these wet bags that were great, last forever. And we used to, and they're really, really funky. And we used to import them from America here to Australia. And I remember, the prices were going up. The exchange rate was fluctuating. It's kind of got back to where it is right now. So it cost me $1 to buy sort of 51 US cents. And at the time we were selling one size of the wet bag for $29.99. And we had to put it up to $34.99, which is only $5, right? But still, even that, the margins were pretty slim, but these were highly sought after products. So they used to bring a lot of traffic to the website and a lot of people into the store to buy them, as long as we had a really good variety. And not long after that, we then had to put them up to $39.99. So we've gone from $29.99 to $39.99. At the time, looking at the US website, and they were selling on the US website for $34.99. And I'm thinking, well, realistically, if you took the exchange rate into account, I should be selling them for a lot more. But I knew that this was kind of the price point at which I would still be able to sell them, and people would still buy them, but it was a little bit pushing the price tag. Anyway, so there were only maybe 4 or 5 people in Australia who sold these bags. And one of them was my competition, who was Elizabeth, who now is part of our expert team. And the other person was someone I knew, and she had them on her website for $29.99 Australian dollars. And so I actually picked up the phone one day and I was like, hey, you have these wet bags on your website for $29.99. Like, how are you doing it? Because I buy a lot of these bags, and I have tried to negotiate pricing with the supplier. I've tried to be the distributor. I've tried everything to get my price point down to the point where I would buy 200 bags to be able to fill it, like the maximum I could fit into a box, because...
So that's a wrap. I'd love to hear what insight you've gotten from this episode and how you're going to put it into action. If you're a social kind of person, follow me at the Salena Knight and make sure to leave a comment and let me know. And if this episode made you think a little bit differently, or gave you some inspiration, or perhaps gave you the kick that you needed to take action, then please take a couple of minutes to leave me a review on your platform of choice. Because the more reviews the show gets, the more independent retail and e-commerce stores just like yours that we can help to scale. And when that happens, it's a win for you, a win for your community, and a win for your customers. I'll see you on the next episode.